Jake, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today, man. Like I was just saying, you're one of the most creative individuals I've seen in the performance space that way. For people who maybe don't know you that well, or they haven't come across your Instagram page where you kind of share a lot of different gamification elements and drills around the performance umbrella, if you will, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all that you've got going on?
So my name's Jake Dyson. My account is Emerge Performance. I started the account a little over a year and a half ago, just to kind of showcase what we're doing, how we're doing it a little bit differently. Hasn't always been that way. We started just very basic, the L drills, the 5-10-5s and stuff like that, and it was just getting really stale. Big groups didn't like it and stuff like that. I remember I just put one together. It was like a curved pickle drill, right? So it was just back and forth along a curve, trying to tag the person in front of you. When you get to one end, tag your switches, you just try to get it. And it not only was really well received with the athletes, but it also blew up online. So I was like, people are interested in stuff like this. Why don't we dive a little bit deeper? So yeah, it started with that one drill. We did some similar things in the past, but it was still pretty much alongside the traditional stuff, but we started I mean, that one drill, we took it, we put it in a straight line, we just ran it like that, and we just built drill after drill after drill. Some are inspired by others online. Most of them are just built off of each other, really. I designed the drills pretty much the morning of while the kids are doing their warm up. I mean, right now we're gamifying the warm ups and a lot now too, so I have to teach it. So I haven't been coming up with as many like change of direction stuff. Plus, it was getting a little out there and stuff like that. But basically, I just think of, do I want to work on change of direction, acceleration, stuff like that? We just build it, we run it. Sometimes they go really well. Most of the times they go really well. Sometimes they don't, and we have to modify, change it on the spot. Um, my litmus test for that is probably I have a few good athletes where if they can't grasp it quick, we modify, and then we modify till we get an end product. And really, if you do follow me and you see some of them, some of those are the ones that also didn't go well. I don't really I show the best reps of the day, but I don't show our perfect drills because I don't think they really exist. So I just show what we're doing and it's receptive and people really like it. It translates really well for my athletes on the field. We still do, probably 35, 40 minutes of our session is still weightlifting and stuff like that, getting stronger in the traditional sense. And then we just use our drill time, 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes to run the stuff and just really get them going. And now we're diving into more of the warm up stuff. And what I find in that is that now we have that high energy right from the start rather than just bringing the high energy at the end. So, yeah, I'm excited to start working with that more. So if you do follow me, that's what's coming.
Yeah, I love that. And as you alluded to that way, you are really mastering this art of making training fun again, for lack of a better way to put it, right? When I was
Yeah.
working in outpatient physical therapy before I got with the team here, I saw a lot of youth athletes, high school, college, and I noticed similar qualities or characteristics amongst them is they've all been training for a long time. And we talk about how great that is because they have such a high training IQ, but a lot of them don't really enjoy training because it's been the same things over and over and over again. And as a result, they lack a lot of general physical qualities. And it's almost like we become too lax in what we're willing to accept from a physical development standpoint in exchange for high skill development, not just in sport, but with specific exercises, right? It's great that we've got kids in high school that are deadlifting 500 pounds, but you put them on one leg or you watch them try to run, and it's like, where did this come from,
Right.
right? We have
Absolutely.
such deep states in some areas, but we've neglected the fun and we've neglected the general movement gymnastics types things. And every time I see you post, I feel like you are, again, just combining all of that into one. And I feel like that's what we've been missing in this physical development, physical performance type space, right? It's like sometimes the kids literally just need a really well done recess session and they don't even get that in school anymore.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that's another big driver, is that we are lacking that in school. And I've had people take shots at me, calling me a glorified PE teacher or a circus or whatever they want to call it. And honestly, it's kind of a compliment because I feel that's what these kids need. I mean, um, I have my little kids who I'm watching develop over time, and it's like they don't need all these highly technical things. They just need reps and having fun. And one of my biggest fears of sending my oldest to school was that he's going to go from playing all day, developing all these physical qualities, to sitting and then not getting it. And hopefully school does a good job and keeps them active and stuff like that. But really, um, yeah, kids aren't. They're not really playing the same games, and it's not like I'm that old and but I played games and I took PE serious, and I was never the strongest athlete, so I never really I mean, my high school didn't even have a weightlifting program, but I was always well balanced. I had good coordination. I was as skilled as a lot of the kids I work with in their sport without ever having a singular lesson. And I think that's just something where kids can't react to variability anymore because, if the ball's not placed on a tee or everything's not perfect conditions, they just can't figure it out anymore. So that's a big driver for me. I read a lot of books on like why the anatomy of a human is what it is. It tells the story of what it needs. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just we're lacking so much natural development, and there's no reason, and that's the fun stuff too. So there's no reason that can't have its spot in the weight room alongside weights. You know, we don't have to just constantly drill these kids into what I call the testing movements, like the 5-10-5 or the L drill or the 40-yard and stuff like that. And those are important. And my kids test perfectly fine in those, and we don't ever do them. Right. So I try to develop as much skill through the fun stuff without ever really doing the boring stuff. And it's translating really well. And on top of that is we have some strong kids. We have a few kids who really like the lifting side. They like to look aesthetically pleasing, and they like to be able to say they lift a lot of weights. But my athletes that I work with, they stand out on the field. They don't stand, like I said, some stand out in the weight room, but mostly they stand out on the field. They're doing things out on the field that their peers, their teammates, and their competitors just aren't. And I think, I haven't done this for 15 years, so I'm not going to sit and claim that what I'm doing is a game changing, thing, but it's working really well for my athletes and it's working well for what I want them to do. And I think if anything else, it gives them a reason to come have fun with their buddies and just be in the weight room consistently. And that's the most important part of the weight room to me, is just the continuity from, sticking with the weight room throughout all their seasons. Um, and then I'm just trying to make it as enjoyable as possible. I don't really care if they remember how much they deadlifted. I care that they remember that they came and they had a good time for the few years that I get to work with them.
You said some absolutely incredible things in there, Jake. And first off, as you were alluding to, it seems we've lost the ability to solve problems in relation to movement. And athletes themselves are not as good at solving issues as maybe they were in the past, right? Like they are so tuned into how it's supposed to be done or the optimal way to do things that they forget nothing in sport is going to be optimal. And a lot of the times you're just solving the problem with whatever creative solution you can come up with on the spot. Patrick Mahomes, to me, is a great example of this. You watch the positions he's throwing from and the amount of movement he does, like nothing about it is always optimal, right? We've got sidearm throws, we've got throws from literally his non-dominant arm, but he's still getting the job done. And that's one of the things that I think makes athletes so effective and have that ability that you mentioned that you had in the past, is the ability to literally just pick up a new sport on the fly and be pretty good at it, because you've got this base athleticism and you've also got this ability to solve creative problems as they're presented to you. And I think adding game and creative elements to it develops that. I think if you do the same drill or test over and over and over again, you're not really exposing the person to a new stimulus or a new thing that sparks creativity, if you will. And the other thing I want to touch on real quick is you mentioned those tests, and as you alluded to, they're phenomenal tests. But it's one of those things, if all we ever do is the test, are we actually getting better as an athlete, or are we just getting better at the test itself, right? If I have a kid and they're in school and I give them the same math test 10 times, yeah, I'm expecting score on the 10th one to be a little higher than the first one, right? They've done it over and
Absolutely.
over again. But have they actually learned more about math, or did they just learn how to get good at that one test? Versus
Yeah.
if you test and then go back to training and then test again and you see improvement on the test, then to me, we're actually improving athleticism and the qualities that we're looking to improve, and not just getting better at a test that's going to give us a standardized number.
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as I don't like Patrick Mahomes, I'm a Bronco fan. But yeah, no, I use I don't like I said, don't use him as an example, but I use like a Steph Curry or a Jason Williams or you can Tiger Woods. Like these people don't get to where they're getting because they just were shoved in a box. Like they manipulate the sports around themselves, and that doesn't happen without the ability to express creativity. And that's why it's hard to tell from 15-second clips on Instagram, but I don't cue these athletes at all. I give them, here's A, get to B, and get to C, however you can do it as fast as possible, because I want them to be able to then be on the field and then see, well, I need to go from A to B. I can get there in all these ways. So in a lot of the times you just watch them figure it out. Like each rep gets better. You know, every once in a while they'll slip or something like that, but each rep gets better, like over and over and over again. And again, I refer back to my kids a lot because I think natural development, and I watch them from birth till where they are now. It's just I don't coach my kids. They just figure it out, and there's no reason that a high school athlete can't do the same thing. If not, they should be better at it. Um, so yeah, this is all done through zero. I call it lazy coaching because they figure it out. We run things for 6, 8 reps at the most, and they've got it down and now they pick it up even quicker because they're problem solving. They're not thinking to themselves like my foot needs to hit here or this cut and I need to get this low on this cut. And on top of that, not everybody moves the same. So I can coach one kid to try to stop and stick on this point where our other kid is going to have to get lower and use his hand to kind of redirect himself. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just everybody's going to move a little bit differently. So that's why I try to stay away from the cues as much as possible. I don't teach specific techniques. I'm not a sprint coach. I'm a sport coach. So that that allows just so much more freedom or expression of their movement. And yeah, I think that's what these drills do a really good job of, is allowing them to express their best abilities in the ways they know how, and then they just get better that way rather than perfecting a technique that may or may not stick with them.
Well, and instead of cueing, you can always add other constraints and you can change the adaptation you get significantly.
Absolutely.
Like, I think of like a partner chase type of drill that way. Maybe it's a curved position that way, and one's chasing the other, and then they turn, and now it's a flip thing. It's like you can literally just give them each a med ball, and now all of a sudden it's like now we're doing that same thing, but we have no arm swing component to it. You can just continue to layer constraint upon constraint and change the adaptation of any one simple thing. And that was just the first example that came to mind. But a lot of the things you share, in my opinion, are some of the best dual task type interventions that I've ever seen. And I think that's another area that we typically neglect in traditional performance and even rehab environments, as well, is the concept of, hey, the brain has to be thinking about something while the body is physically doing something very demanding. And there's so many, white papers out there talking about the benefits of it, from attention and memory and all those different things. And I don't know about you, but I'm not the best at citing white papers off top of my head like that. But I know it's out there. So if you're interested, go Google it. But to me, that's the kind of stuff that a lot of kids are getting that dual task in a negative way, right? They're doing something like they're studying and they're on their phone, or they're holding a conversation and they're sitting there texting. We've almost made the dual task a negative, looking at how we've evolved as a society to this point where we can never be just present in the moment doing multiple, doing one thing. So it's like, to me, this almost flips the script on that and makes it more of a positive dual task of we are fully present in the moment, but in the moment requires us to be 100% physically present and cognitively present to solve a very unique problem that's presented to us that way.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I don't I it's what I do is it's science-based in a way that I believe that I'm taking a scientific approach to it. Like I'm testing, I'm experimenting, but I don't find this stuff in papers. I don't really read papers on the change of direction and stuff like that. So I'm watching it in real time, and some people aren't going to like that approach, but you also just have to get in there, experiment, experience. Otherwise, it's not going to move forward. It's just going to constantly stay the same because, yeah, scientifically, if you take a test like you mentioned over and over and over again, you're going to get better at it. But will that ever translate onto the field? And I want these athletes to be able to perform without thinking, essentially. Um, when it comes to reacting to opponent and stuff like that, you obviously have like game theory and stuff like that. But when I have one of my football players out on the field, I don't want him to freeze, to analyze, and then react. He's got to do it all in real time. And I have a couple of the shiftiest athletes for their age that I've ever seen. And, you know, they come that way a little bit and we just expand upon it. So yeah. So I'm science based without the research papers, I guess.
Looking at the dozens, if not hundreds, of different drills and games that you've developed, how do you mentally make sense of them or classify them? Do you kind of categorize them by the equipment they involve? Maybe it's a PVC pipe or a pool noodle or a balloon, or do you characterize it more based on what they're developing, like a linear speed or a change of direction? Or how do you go about making sense of all of these unique things in the head? Because, like you mentioned, this is not stuff that's taught in a textbook, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think it'd be really hard to put it in a textbook. It was really hard for me to just write it out in my drill notebook. So, I just classify it. It's mainly change of direction, acceleration, deceleration. Those are 90% of the drills that I post. Like we can't do a ton of linear speed. There's not enough distance in the facility that I'm in. Only about if you go diagonally across the turf, it's about 20 yards. So we can't do any like sprinting. I do call it sprint sometimes, and I need to get away from that. But it's acceleration, deceleration mainly. You could call it footwork and balance, I think is a good way to classify some of them. And those are the ones where it's more like really hard cuts or a spin or something like that. And then just like straight acceleration where they're usually chasing something down. Um, but I don't, yeah, that's mainly how I classify it. Is like, do we want to work on change of direction? I call it more defending than agility, but it probably can be called agility when you're reacting to your opponent. And did I say that? Acceleration, deceleration, change of direction, and then yeah, I'll just call it agility as for the sake of simplicity. But those are about the three that we work on the most when it comes to the drills, and it's kind of just they're in those buckets. I don't really like write them down and categorize them in those buckets, but in my head, that's where I'm at.
So ACell, decel, change direction, and agility are kind of our three buckets that you just outlined that way. What are your go-to drills or games currently in those three buckets? Like if it's going to be a ACell, decel emphasis, where are you going first? And then after we get through that, I want to hear more about kind of your thought process behind developing some of these new games and stuff.
I guess the change of direction are the ones where the acceleration and deceleration are combined. But my favorite change of direction drill is I have basically two end zones, right? And an athlete just has the complete freedom to shake their opponent and get through untouched. Um, it's one of my favorite ones to watch, both the offensive side and defensive side of it. because it expresses so much creativity. So though that's probably my favorite, change of direction or acceleration, deceleration. For acceleration solely, it's going to be like the chase downs, toss a ball, drop a garbage bag. I've done it with balloons. It's not my favorite. That way they just, they're a little too unpredictable. Or a chase down. So I called it a gun barrel on Instagram one time and I think it got flagged. So I call it, it's like a tunnel, right? So you got one person who starts off maybe 5 yards further and then another one, and they're curving at different directions and they meet in the tunnel. And if the chaser gets really really fast out the gate, they'll get them early, they'll just angle it, but most of the time it's going to end with one really chasing down the other. And sometimes we'll get a pool noodle out, sometimes we'll just use a hand, a lot of times we just race to like the weightlifting drop pads. Those work really well. Deceleration, I really like grabbing about like a 12-inch plyo box. They have to run over it and stop within a certain distance. It overemphasizes the deceleration if we're working solely on that. And then sometimes off of that, I'll have them either do a turn or go around a cut and accelerate back the other way. So that's ACL, decel, change of direction. Yeah. Yeah. So those are my go-tos for those 3 buckets.
That's incredible, and it sounds like as you were talking, understanding the principles underneath those things really drive the creation of the game or drill or whatever we wanna call it in this case, right? So, when you were talking about change direction, for example, you were mentioning that there has to be a rapid deceleration followed by a rapid acceleration, and that's gonna be in a new direction, right? Change of direction. So, if we don't understand what goes into these athletic qualities, then we can't understand how to gamify that and how to apply that in a more creative sense, I guess I'm trying to say that way. And you can go about that so many different ways, right? You could look in and zoom in more at just a penultimate step, or you could look at it and kind of change the angulation that they're cutting at. I do this a little bit from more of an exercise lens with the concept of rep without rep, similar to you. No cueing that way. The only cue is, hey, make each rep look different. And I don't care what that different is. It could just be a different foot placement, but it could be a different tempo. It could be a different trunk lean position. It could be any one of 1,000 different variables that way. And I think sometimes literally just setting up those loose games, kind of like you were mentioning, and adding a competitive element to it as well. You mentioned about the partner incorporation. You mentioned about, chasing and that sort of thing. I think that brings out the best from a training standpoint, because I think when we don't have that competition element, it's so easy for athletes to just kind of give it 80% instead of their all, or,
Mhm.
ease up a little bit. But as soon as a competitive element is introduced, it seems like, we have this hatred for losing and no one wants to be the one who loses. So everyone kind of brings it to their best when we introduce that competitive element. And I think having the reactionary component too, where you're maybe mirroring someone else, provides a training stimulus that's very difficult to uh, recreate in the weight room otherwise, or recreate in speed training otherwise. And to me, that's more of a sport specific or game specific adaptation, if you will, because a lot of times in sport, you're reacting to a stimulus, right? Where is the ball right now? Was the ball just hit? Was it just kicked my direction? Was it passed to me? Am I on a football field and it was just handed off, or it's a play action or whatever? It's always some kind of reactionary component. And I think incorporating that from the performance sense while you're having a very specific targeted stimulus in mind is just absolutely like next level, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, it's just that's what I care about the most is how they're performing on the field. So that's what I try to give them. It'd be pretty simple if we just worked on acceleration or just deceleration, but like you noted, that's not how a game works, right? You have to be able to decelerate and then get back out of it. You're not just going to practice deceleration. And then that's kind of what I noticed with some of the other drills I see from other people is they just lack the second level of it. So it's probably just not translating as much as it could, because sure, you can stop on a dime, but can you just stop on a dime and completely turn around and go the other way? Like that's the difference between like a good drill and a great drill, in my opinion.
Walk me through what a typical session would look like for you with your athletes that way, and do you change maybe the duration of the games or anything like that based on if they're an in-season or out-of-season group, or how do you kinda go about putting the rubber to the road with these?
So right now we are in track season in Iowa. So right now we're not doing a lot of the hard acceleration stuff. We're more gamifying and bringing the problem solving into the warm up. Just because they're either tired from coming in from a late meet or they're tired from sprinting and stuff like that. So yeah, we change it based off of that. When we get into the summer, we're it's just baseball, so we're able to do whatever we want to do. So a lot of the summer we'll do like contact prep and stuff like that, getting people ready for football. But yeah, so it does change a little bit based off the season. But at the same time, I try to microdose everything throughout the year because there really is no true off season. Um, but yeah, so a typical session right now, you're gonna come in, you're probably gonna do you're gonna do our typical warm-ups that I'm kind of building like a small like base library. We like to do a lot of tennis ball warm-ups, a lot of hops, partner stuff. And then more often than not, you're gonna try the new weird warm-up that I came up with, the week of. And we're gonna see how it goes. It's gonna take a minute to 2 minutes. So we're gonna see how it goes. If it makes it in to the rotation, great. If it doesn't, we scrap it, we move on. Um, and then we're gonna lift. I don't have a ton of weightlifting equipment. It works really well for this space. So that's how I design that is typically we're gonna have like three main movements. Not that everybody's gonna do. It's basically so we're either gonna, we're gonna do our compound barbell stuff, trap bar stuff, Olympic stuff. We're gonna do one of those. Then we're probably gonna add in a secondary main, which is gonna be either similar or we're gonna switch it over unilateral. We do a lot of unilateral stuff lately, with our lower body stuff. And that'll take us through probably 20 minutes of the lift. Then we'll add in a couple accessories, hamstring. I'm running through like a lower body one. We'll do like hamstrings, hips, knees, quads, something along those lines. Um, Especially we're doing more slow loading because they get plenty of fast loading right now in track when it comes to our accessories. And then that'll take us, to the 35-40 minute mark. And then lately, because they're so worn out from track, we're either going to do some core work or we're going to do, we'll do a not high intensity drill from like a sprint standpoint. We'll still do something I guess I forgot. So we add our jumps in. It's usually in between the warm up and the main lift, and then do the main lift, do the accessories. If we haven't been getting to a lot of the drills lately, but if it wasn't track season, that's where the drills come in. And then that's going to just be what we want to work on for the day. So as we get closer to football, and volleyball, we'll do change of direction stuff. We stick with change of direction and acceleration stuff through the fall and winter sports. We get into the spring, we ditch the acceleration a little bit more, and we do more of like the problem solving stuff. And then in the summer, like I said, it's just an absolute, I'll call it a crapshoot, but we do whatever we want to do because we'll have like, 20 extra minutes. So we'll add in. And I mean, that could be anywhere from playing a game of like weird arm slot baseball competition or something like that. We do play a lot of games like that throughout the summer. But yeah, the lifting, warm up's fun. Lifting's pretty basic. Drills are fun. Um, yeah, I try my best not to be some movement guru. I don't, and that's why if you do follow me, you're seeing a lot of the same stuff right now. Even like repeat videos, because I'm not gonna make up a movement for the sake of novelty for the athletes and for Instagram. That's not what the goal is. So yeah, that's where we're sitting right now. Track season is my least favorite season from the trainee standpoint because they're just, it's so high intensity in the afternoon that I have to leave them with something left by the end of the day. But summer's fun.
You mentioned contact prep in there, and to me, there are very few sports that are truly non-contact in nature. I know they say like, "Oh, women's lacrosse is non-contact." Have you seen the bruises those girls come in with after they play?
Yeah.
There's contact. There is a lot of contact in these traditional non-contact sports, and I think part of the reason that many people are, going on and on about the injuries that we see in these sports is we've never prepared them for contact with someone else, right? Not only do we have all those game elements that we talked about before, right? Changing, evolving stimulus, you need to be physically and cognitively aware and so on that way. But now you have to do all that where someone else might collide with you. You might, land in a really awkward position, or we take volleyball and you're landing on top of someone else sometimes, right? Like you get all these really weird situations that come up. And ultimately, if we don't expose the athlete to that, then we're, in my opinion, failing to prepare them for what we know the sport is going to demand of them. So I think ultimately, including some of those is super essential, but that's an area I don't think we've discussed as much thus far. How do you like to progress your contact drills, and how do you like to even just pair up athletes amongst contact drills? Because even just looking at, your high school sport, for example, where I grew up in Pennsylvania, high school varsity would be freshman to senior year. So we've got 14-year-olds and 18-year-olds on the same team. And well, let's be real. There's a little difference between the 14-year-olds and the 18-year-olds sometimes,
Yeah.
but they're going to be going against each other on the field. So how do we, consider training to help prepare them versus maybe what practice in the sport will provide them for?
Yeah. I'd go as far as say that there is no sport that's non-contact. I mean, you're contacting something, right? It's whether it's the ground or a ball or a person. So I don't let any athlete that I work with get away from the contact prep stuff. It's like sometimes we'll dial it back a little bit different. I'm not going to train my volleyball player to wrestle over an exercise ball like I do. But sometimes they still want to do it. So how I approach contact prep is you just kind of have to get your body ready to be rattled in one way or another, right? So it doesn't have to get super sports specific or scientific. It's like sometimes you're just going to pick up this huge wrestling dummy and you're going to slam it into the ground and it's going to rattle your entire body and you're just going to get used to it, right? So we do that. My favorite one is like the Swiss ball wrestling. That gets so much fun and it gets so competitive. um, and then you're not interacting necessarily with another person, but you're still getting slammed into the ground and stuff like that. And the balloon keep it up competition. Like, yeah, your objective is to hit the balloon, which is very little contact, but I mean, you've probably seen the video. They're throwing each other around, they're throwing each other to the ground, and kids all they just thrive off of it. I've never seen a little kid shy away from contact. I don't know where that stops and like we start getting really scared of it. I think people and parents included, they're like, whoa, 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 are you okay? Type of parenting it's great, but at the same time, it's like my 3-year-old jumps off of 4-foot tall slides and just lands like a superhero, slamming himself into the ground, and he is fine. We're built to handle that to an extent. You just have to do it, and then if you stay used to it, I don't see why I don't there's just a benefit to it, it's I treat contact prep almost more of like a mental preparation. Does this kind of get beat up a little bit? Because in all sports where there's literal contact, if you are not scared of it and you will initiate it and you manipulate your opponent to it, that's an advantage always, in my opinion, whether it's football, basketball, wrestling, the traditional where you're contacting another body. If you are in charge of the contact, you are going to win that most of the time, unless you're seriously outmatched. As far as pairing up the athletes, I usually go off of strength, not weight. Um, But most of the time, if you're as strong as somebody, you're probably pretty close to their weight. Um, I have one girl that I'll match up with the boys every once in a while. I made the mistake last week of matching up probably one of my strongest athletes with one of my smaller athletes, and I posted it, and if you could watch it, it's really funny, but that's probably, you know, that had a lot of benefit to the smaller athlete, I think. Um, Not so much the big one. So far as matching it up, usually try to go as much off of strength as I can. But I'm private, so I don't have a ton of athletes. So we're gonna match you up with your best matchup. Sometimes I'm gonna mismatch you on purpose, and you're not gonna get hurt. I'm not gonna put people in situations to get hurt, but sometimes you're gonna be really outmatched and you're gonna get your butt whipped, and that's got its merit as well.
And to your point on contact in particular, I think for some reason we have kind of misunderstood this training component in the sense that we now think if it hurts, we shouldn't do it, and pain equals injury 100% of the time. When in reality, if we watch some of these sports, right? This morning, I was talking with someone who grew up in the horseback riding kind of space that way. So when we start to peel that back, right? If you fall off a horse running at full speed, or if you're a barrel racer, or if you're in PBR and you fall off a freaking bull, guess what? It's probably not going to feel great. You can be perfectly clear from a medical standpoint, no broken bones, no major injuries, and not feel great because of the level of contact that you just experienced at once, right? You took a lot of force all at once, but you're able to walk it off and it's okay. I think we need to kind of reframe the way we think about pain in the sense that pain does not always equal injury. And sometimes some of these normal little aches or stuff that we get post training are actually maybe a good thing because it says, hey, look, you just exposed your body to a new stimulus that it hasn't felt before, right? Give it a day or two, it goes away. Let's keep going. Same thing as muscle soreness, right? People get sore in their muscles and we accept that as normal, but we get sore from contact and all of a sudden we think we're injured. I think maybe we've flipped the script on that in the wrong direction.
Yeah, 100%, and that's a rabbit hole that I can really get down. So I was a chiropractor, beforehand, so take that as it is. Um, so I'm very familiar with we think we're injured all the time for the most part. And it's really, really bad among adults. And now I think it's trickling down to kids. And it's a combination of that nobody wants to feel uncomfortable anymore. And then how easy is it to be like, go Google my knee hurts and convincing yourself that there's something wrong with you, right? So yeah, we can either dive down that if you want, or we can stay off of it. But I think
No, why not?
I I think pain is beyond psychological, and it's now just access to information of why you're in pain, or you have movement gurus telling you why you're in pain, or you have chiropractors who tell you why you're in pain, or you have these companies who train, chiropractors or physical therapists or doctors to tell you why you're in pain. And there's not very many people that just tell you that you're fine, right? So I'm the kind of person where even if while I'm like actively acutely in pain, I'm dying. I 100% get that. But when I can sit and just like sit in my pain for a little bit, it's like, okay, I'm gonna be okay. What can I do next? Um, I use this analogy or I don't even know analogy metaphor. I'm not good with that type of stuff. But I always ask my client, like, if a lion was chasing you, would you still run away? Yes? Okay. You're probably okay. It's not hurting that bad where you can't function. And I used that a lot when I was in practice as a chiropractor, and it's one of the main reasons I got out of it, right? So it's people will blame everything on their pain. And I tell my athletes all the time, like, you are not injured, and kids are really bad about it sometimes. You are not injured. You are okay. When did this start hurting? Yesterday? Okay. Give it a week, give it 2 weeks, do what you can do. And most of the time, after they've told me, they go about their stuff normally. So it's not, Yeah, the pain side of things is it's a societal problem that I don't see going anywhere because there's too many movement systems and practitioners that profit off of it, and they're not going to ever stop perpetuating the narrative that pain equals a problem, right? When's the last, like, I can ask you, when's the last time that you have felt 100% pain free? I honestly cannot even tell you. And it doesn't bother me at all.
And I'm right there with you, right? Like everyone knows me as the guy who posts the pull-ups on Instagram all over my story all the time, right? We love weighted pull-ups, but it's like today when I was doing them, my left bicep was tweaking out the whole time, but I still did it, right? We didn't rupture a tendon. There wasn't anything structurally wrong. Like we're good. To your point, every time something feels a little bit off, people immediately think, I need to figure out what this is and why it is. And I think another element that has maybe pushed this in the wrong direction, when I was practicing in Maryland, there was a specific radiology group I'm not going to name that a lot of athletes would get their MRIs from. And, in Maryland, physical therapists are allowed to order imaging. So I could fill out X-ray, MRI scripts, all that stuff. Blessing and a curse, because now everyone wants what I call magnet therapy. They want an MRI, they want to see what's going on. And I'm not a radiologist, so I don't know what kind of causes this, but these reports, even if it was very simple, would have 7, 8, 9 findings, right? Mild quad tendonitis, mild patellar tendonitis, mild IT band friction system syndrome, mild this, mild that. Like the list would go on and on and on. And you'd have a kid that, probably just needs to train for a month or two consistently and is going to be, fine in relation to the pain that they were experiencing, who's now absolutely terrified to do anything because we've told them that they've got 5, 10 different things wrong with their knee, when in reality, they just need to actually get moving and get training a little bit more, right? And I think, to your point, just from a healthcare provider side, there's this growing pressure on healthcare providers where if you can't give someone an answer when they come into you with pain, then you're wrong and they're going somewhere else because they want an answer and they want to know. And half the time, the answer is probably not a diagnosis because there's not a whole lot to diagnose. I mean, you're not going to, in my opinion, you shouldn't be diagnosing someone with a tight hamstring causing their pain or a weak quad causing their pain. Like you can point out deficits all day long, but to me, hamstring tightness is not a diagnosis, right? Like we cannot continue to live and die on that hill. And I think part of that too, like you had mentioned the parent element before, I would imagine that this impacts a lot of what we've seen in the training world in the sense that parents want their kids on the programs that are comfortable, that are safe, that don't cause them to feel pain because we've now associated every feeling of pain with an orthopedic visit for whatever reason, right? It's like, can we maybe turn things back and say, hey, look, this is the sport. We're going to prepare them for it. Sure, it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows, but guess what? Your kid's going to be an absolute stud athlete. And in relation to avoiding true injury, we're probably better off by training like this, as opposed to just kind of babying it the whole time and never actually getting where we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very blessed with the parent group that I have with the athletes I work really closely with because yes, at times they still take their kids to practitioners more than I'd like. Actually, I don't really care that they take them. It's if they over listen to them, right? So, and most of the time they don't because they just want an answer. They just want to know if something's seriously wrong. But um no, so I'm really blessed when it comes to that is they have this unrelenting trust in me that I'm not gonna hurt their kids, right? And you know, luckily we've only had one injury and it had nothing to really do with what we were actually doing. It was an instance where they kicked over a Earl and stepped on something sharp. It had nothing to do with like the actual activity. It was just kind of a little freak thing. But I don't think the parents even talked to me about it. I think we just kind of handled the business and moved on. And that person still trains with me. But to your point on, you know, you get on these things and or you get these, I think you said it was like a radiology group, but yeah, there's literal systems and businesses built to give people answers. And you've probably seen hundreds of, medical images. I don't think I've ever looked at one where I couldn't have pointed out something was wrong. Like I don't, but what's the purpose of that fear element, right? The problem is then you get these companies that teach you point exactly to this because it's going to show up on every single person's x-ray that you ever see, and then scare the hell out of them that that's their problem and they'll come to you forever. And that's the biggest problem I have. Or, without naming specific movement systems or whatever you want to call it, it's like if your foot is turned out like this, it is 100% the reason that you're gonna break your neck or something. These claims are. I'm trying to be a little like satirical about it, but they're legitimately saying the this biggest pile of shit to normal things, right? And people can't, just not enough people can sniff that out yet. Hopefully they'll figure it out. But a big thing for me too is like, you want to argue that these things are like natural movement, or, this is how we were designed to move. That's not true at all, right? We were designed to move not on hard, flat surfaces, not with shoes on our feet, not with all these things, not that our foot is freaking turned out half a degree. And that's the problem. We get so far away from nature that nothing's natural, that yet you're claiming things are natural. And that's a cause of pain. I don't know if that made sense. I talked a little bit in circles about it, but we're so far away from natural movement that I don't think anybody should ever use that term.
Right, and human movement in itself is so complex, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
we go back to talking about your drills for a second. It's like the drills cover so many different things, right? If I go to the gym and I just do lateral raises as my shoulder work for the day, I'm really only training one, maybe one or two muscle groups, one main movement pattern, versus if I get my hands on the ground and I start doing crab walks and all these different crazy variations, I'm training my shoulders in a lot more manners, if you will, that probably provides me better adaptation. So to me, it's like, I think maybe the less optimal option of we're going to move and we're not going to care if it's perfectly symmetrical or perfectly even, if it's 1 degree off or whatever. That way, people pick some weird hills to die on sometimes. It's like sometimes we literally just need to get the ball rolling and put it in motion and keep it in motion. And I think the other piece, from a movement assessment standpoint, like if you give your athletes the same drill for a week, you're probably going to see them do it different each day, not just in relation to, their understanding of the drill, but all the other factors that impact them, because we forget athletes have lives outside of sport, right? They have to eat, they have to go to school, they have to take classes and do homework, they have to go home. Who knows what their home situation is like? Maybe they love going home, maybe they hate going home, right? Not my place to judge, just saying that there are so many other factors and influences that impact the athlete that we see that we can't really account for all of them. So yeah, maybe one day they turn their foot out 2 degrees on a screen and the next day they don't, right? Like maybe that's the difference between an hour of sleep. Or maybe that's the
Yeah.
difference between, one day they actually stretched or warmed up properly before they came in or whatever it is, right? Like we're so focused on hanging our hats on these arbitrary things without actually looking at the full picture. And I think the more we kind of step back and say, hey, look, the kids just have to move and kind of get a little bit more wild in their training, if you will, the better off they're
Yeah.
going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, if I run the same drill for a week, it's going to look different every day. But I mean, even if they run it 5 times, their foot's going to look different. Their knee angles are going to look different with it, rep after rep after rep. And people are, I mean, I posted this one video where they were running and they turned into a back pedal, right? And each time, and I broke it down and I watched it myself. but the foot contact was different every single time just because, they turned a little bit too or a little earlier or a little later, whatever, and the internet lost its freaking mind, man. I mean, we were gonna be tearing ACLs, which didn't even make sense for what we were doing. We were gonna tear Achilles. People were pissed off that one kid was touching the ground and one wasn't, and it's like, dude, that's why we did it. It's so it was different. So now they're trained in all those angles rather than what you thought it was supposed to look like, right? And some kids need to be told how to do things, but not my kids. I mean, and that's why they're doing what they're doing is because they're trained in as many scenarios as I can think of, whether that's a good or a bad thing, but we're out here trying to create as much variability as possible. I don't really care how they do it. I just want to see them do it. I want to see them achieve what they're trying to achieve. And yeah, I mean, people have
Oh,
people have so many opinions who don't know what like I said, 15 seconds of a video and you have an opinion on it that you couldn't just flick your thumb and move on. Yeah, if somebody just asked me, it's like, that's the point. I wanted it to look different or be different every single time.
well, and to your point, like watch sport, right? You
Oh,
watch
yeah.
sport. How you can't play basketball without driving down the lane to the basket, right? Well, I had a guy who tore his Achilles doing that. Should I just tell him, hey, you can go back to basketball, but you can never drive down the lane again? That's not really playing the sport, right? And ACLs, the majority of the ones that I have seen post-operatively have torn via a valgus moment. Well, how are we going to play sport if we never go into a valgus moment, right? Watch a skier, watch a football player, a basketball player, pick a sport. There's going to be valgus moments at the knee in almost every one of those sports. So the question becomes, do we teach them to fear that position so much that they go years and years and years without training it and then wonder why we got injured in that position for the first time we've been there in years? Or do we actually just let the body move? I'm not saying encourage moving into those positions, per se, but more so let it move naturally so that they actually learn how to strengthen and how to stabilize in these at-risk positions, because if they're never exposed to them, then they're never going to actually learn how to maybe use their body's inherent stability systems and muscular systems and so on that way, the way that they're meant to.
Yeah. Yeah, the valgus thing drives me crazy. It's like, are you never gonna cut across the middle? Like, it's and then you could get into the argument too, where it's like, cleats are such an unnatural piece of equipment. I blame a lot of that on stuff like that too. It's not necessarily the valgus, it's the over valgus because, the cleat sticks and you have to cut and yeah, I don't know. I fear no movements because I don't think I think you're never gonna avoid movement, so what's the point of fearing it? Um, but yeah, I mean, people again, it goes back to wanting to find an answer where there's nothing, and, so people will do that.
To your point on footwear, just if you're listening, pick a footwear brand, I don't care which one. Just Google where their shoes are made and look at the profit margins on those things, right? They're making them for pennies on the dollar. Quality is going out the window, right? I used to have an adjunct professor back when I was in school who, in addition to being a PT, owned a shoe store. And he said his favorite game to do was go in and pick out 5 boxes of the same size shoe, pull them out, and look at how a size 11 on the left and the right doesn't actually look like the same size shoe anymore. And he actually has to kind of switch them around in the boxes to literally make the same size shoes match because they're slightly off. So I agree with your point on cleats, and that could be a whole conversation in itself at some point, is how we've really kind of neglected the whole foot ankle complex in training and the implications that has on injury. But um, to avoid going down that rabbit hole for now, is there anything we missed as we were chatting, Jake, or anything else that you really wanted to get into today?
Not really. I think we covered it.
I
Uh,
appre
Yeah, go ahead.
For people who want to find out more about you online, your offerings, you mentioned, I think you've got some programs and an online store set up and different things that way. Where can they find you at?
Yeah, so, find me on Instagram. I have a website, don't go visit it yet, it's still under construction. Um, so that'll be coming out. You can go on Instagram and shoot me a DM. I will read them all. If you're kind and you're actually looking for an answer, and I can tell you're looking for an answer, I'll always message you back. But yeah, Emerge Performance on Instagram is the best way to reach me. Yeah, other than that, I'll have a link up on that in the next few weeks. You can join a waitlist for the website, but yeah, I'm pretty accessible through Instagram.
That's awesome. We'll link to all of that in the description below. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there and keep up to date on all the incredible things that Jake is doing. Jake, this was incredible, man. Thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It was a good time.